Today I wanted to address this business of when he, in this case he is going to be the spouse with autism spectrum disorder, when he drifts away. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times she, the NT wife, will email me or post a comment in some of my Facebook pages, and she will say, well, you know, we were working on things, making a deliberate effort to do so, and things went well for, a couple weeks, and then he stopped doing it. It being, there was actually some conversation, give and take conversation, some emotional reciprocity. He was actually showing some affection and some empathy and providing some, moral support and so forth. Making a good faith effort. He really tried. He wants to make her happy, and he was doing well for a while. And then he starts drifting away. And what I mean by that is some of his connectedness starts to wane. And then she, the NT wife, views that as, oh, we're right back to square one again. This was just a temporary thing. It was just a phase. It wasn't genuine, and we're right back to this business of me feeling like I'm not important anymore. But you know what? Because of the mind blindness and the alexithymia business, and if you have any questions about that, I've got a ton of videos on those two things. He doesn't know he's drifting away. He's not purposely having the thought, oh, this emotional reciprocity is killing me. I've got to go back to my special interest because she's annoying and I just don't want to spend that much time with her. He doesn't have those kinds of thoughts. He doesn't know that the connection is starting to deteriorate. He's out of touch with his emotions. He's out of touch with your emotions. He's not reading your body language, your facial cues. He's not picking up on your comments if you're suggesting that he's slipping. He's going to have to take a direct cue from you, the NT wife, that we're starting to revert back to our old poor relatedness skills. And so you could come up with a phrase or a keyword. You could just say something tactfully like, honey, I think we're slipping. And you can let him know ahead of time what that means. What that means is we were doing well for a while. We were actually having some give and take in conversation. You're actually showing me some empathy, some affection. I could tell that you were trying, and now it seems as though you have stopped trying. That's his cue when you say we're slipping. He knows what that means. And he, in most cases, I have found that he will go, oh, okay, well, thanks for telling me because I didn't know. I wasn't purposely trying to disconnect. I thought we were still connected. So if you find that he is doing well for a time and you actually feel like you're getting somewhere and making some progress, but then it starts to revert back, you're going to have to let him know. He's not doing it intentionally. He doesn't know the subtleties of your feelings. He can't read your feelings. He can't read your mind. You're going to have to let him know in very concrete terms, hey, we're slipping. We were doing well. I want to go back to how we were going and getting along 2 weeks ago. Remember that? 2 weeks ago when things were going pretty good? I'm going to go back to that again. And he will, in most cases, go, okay, yeah, thanks for telling me. Okay? So the moral to this story is, when you're doing well for a time, and things start to slip, let him know. We're slipping. Can we go back to, we were doing pretty good a couple of weeks ago. Can we go back to that? That would be a big help to him. There's nothing that you need to do in the way of changing your personality. So there is way more positives associated with ASD level 1 than negative. Well, to the programmable computer we're on right now, for crying out loud, Bill Gates. Okay? So I don't want anybody to think that you're less of a person. And I think that's an important point to tell guys on the autism spectrum, because if you're like most other guys, your self-esteem is already in the toilet and has been there for a long time. It's not uncommon for him as a little boy to be a problem child at home, to be a problem student at school, has a hard time getting a girlfriend, has a hard time fitting in with peers, and so he just decides to take on solitary activities just to kind of avoid even trying to fit in. And then he finally hooks up with an NT woman, and they get married, and now He's now getting even more reminders about how he's falling short, not measuring up and not doing what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to try harder, and if you would just try harder, you would do better, and yada yada. A lifetime, in many cases, of disapproval. So there's nothing wrong with you. There's a lot different about you, but a lot of times, different is good. Where would we be as a society, not just in 2021, but look back in history? There's been a ton of people with autism that have created and invented so many things that we would not have today without them. What we want to do, I call them workarounds, because they're not fixes in the sense that you can go back and now become a neurotypical. And I hate the term masking, but because that sounds kind of like you're trying to be deceitful. But there is nothing wrong. And by the way, neurotypicals do this too. There is nothing wrong with wanting to present yourself in the best possible light. That's just the smart thing to do. If the NTs want to be sarcastic and call that masking, which they tend to want to do that, that's fine. Go ahead and use that term. I don't care. The fact is, everybody, unless they have antisocial personality disorder, perhaps, they at some level do want to put their ego in the closet and pride aside and put on their best behavior so that they can get accepted by others. The lack of demonstrated empathy is possibly the most dysfunctional aspect of Asperger's or high-functioning autism. But I do use the term demonstrated empathy for a very important reason, and I want to be very clear about this. It's not that people on the autism spectrum have no empathy. They do. Rather, they often give the impression that they do not care about other people. However, this is due to their mind blindness, alexithymia, executive function deficits, anxiety, and even sensory sensitivities, and has little to do with their ability or willingness to have feelings for others. Now, that's no excuse to be verbally aggressive towards the children, though. People on the autism spectrum experience difficulties in basic elements of social interaction that could include lack of social and emotional reciprocity, impaired nonverbal behaviors, for example, making eye contact, noticing facial expressions of others, the posture and gesture of others, and so on. Also, failure to seek shared enjoyments or achievements with others is common. And lastly, it's not uncommon for these individuals to fail to develop long-term close relationships, with the exception of very close family members. People on the autism spectrum are usually withdrawn around others unless they're talking about their special interest or it's work-related. The individual on the spectrum may engage in a one-sided, long-winded speech about his favorite subject while misunderstanding or not even recognizing that the listener's not even paying attention. This social awkwardness has been called active but odd, and this failure to react appropriately to social interaction may appear as disregard for others' feelings and may come across as insensitivity, selfishness, and even narcissism. The cognitive ability of people on the autism spectrum often allows them to articulate social norms in a laboratory context where they may be able to show a theoretical understanding of others' emotions. However, they typically have difficulty acting on this knowledge in fluid, real-life situations. People with the disorder may analyze and distill their observation of social interaction into rigid behavioral guidelines and apply these rules in awkward ways. For example, forced eye contact, which can result in a demeanor that appears rigid or even socially naive. Also, in childhood, they desire to have companions and fit in with their peers, but that desire often becomes numbed through a history of failed social encounters through childhood, adolescence, and into adulthood. Now, regarding verbal aggression, in a nutshell, what you're dealing with here has a lot more to do with the traits of the disorder than it does with your husband's inability to empathize with his children. But, and this is a big but, having mind blindness, alexithymia, executive function deficits, anxiety, sensory sensitivities, and so on does not give him a license to be verbally aggressive towards his children. And to your husband and the other autistic husbands out there that are listening, Children are safe targets, and it's very cowardly for you to pick on somebody smaller than you. You wouldn't treat a man your age, your height, your weight the way you treat your kids now, would you? It's the cowardly, wimpy thing to do. It's the most immature behavior that you can resort to vent towards safe, innocent, vulnerable targets like children. And karma will have something to say about that at some point. So you may think you're getting away with that. You are not. So the question is, did you know that your wife is dependent on you for nurturance? Did you know that your wife is dependent on you for nurturance? And when I say dependent, I mean that in the fullest sense of the term. And there's some women out there that are going, I'm not dependent on him for nurturance. I don't want to be dependent on him. I can understand why they might say that. But if she wasn't dependent on you, if you weren't responsible to meet her emotional needs, why is she angry? Why has she been complaining? Why has she been crying? Why has she been researching all over the internet trying to figure out what's going on? She is dependent on you to meet her emotional needs. Not all of them, but the lion's share of her emotional needs she's hoping to get from you. Now, there are cases when, we'll use the example where there's kids involved and he's emotionally unavailable, and she may turn to one of the children to meet some of her emotional needs and may, at an unconscious level, turn that child into kind of a husband figure. It happens. It's not uncommon. But short of that, a good 60% plus of her needs in the emotional sense and in the nurturing sense, they come from you. She relies on you for validation, empathy, compassion, love, gratitude, connection, quality time, all of these things. And you haven't been delivering. I think you've tried, and I think you want to deliver. You just haven't figured out how to do it in a way that is meaningful and satisfying to her. She's like a potted plant, and you're like the watering can, and she's over there, and you haven't watered her much. You sprinkle a little bit every once in a while just for a token hydration. But in the meantime, her roots are shrinking up, her petals are shrinking up, her soil is dry. She's dying over there inside. And you're sitting back scratching your head confused as to what the problem is. As you're standing there with a full can of water and I don't know how to sprinkle it on you, honey. Sorry, you're so upset and unhappy. So if your neurotypical wife has been complaining, crying, depressed, physically, mentally sick, you haven't been meeting her needs. I don't know how to make it any simpler than that. This is not an exaggeration. So, what can be done? Well, you can learn how to water her. You can learn how to use your watering can and get the job done. There's many ways to meet your wife's needs, emotional needs, social needs, intimacy needs, sexual needs. Many ways to get that done. I could spend the next 3 hours talking about it. It's not rocket science. But anyway, there is a link below this video, and we're going to have a men's group coming up. I would strongly suggest you guys join. And we will look at some things that you can do to begin the business of you doing your job. If you're married, you signed up for a job. Not that it's just work, of course, but there are tasks that need to be done or the marriage will dissolve. So the ball is in your court, guys.